Hey, what's up guys? Just wanted to make a video to basically show you my process for making this character. I think it turned out pretty good, so let's get into it. First, I just want to show you what the final model looks like. Obviously, it's fully rigged and you can move everything around. It has features like lighting and all this stuff too, so it's pretty cool. But yeah, without further ado, let's go to the place where everything first started. So the first thing I did was basically work on the sphere that we have here itself. I basically flattened the sides and just started to form the head shape. I extruded out a jaw, and I also added a cylinder, which I'm going to use as the neck. So basically it's just like a basic representation of the neck that we're going to fuse later. Accuracy is not extremely important in these times, and you kind of just want to mark things out. That's the main goal here. I also added an ear with a UV sphere, and I mirrored it across the head, so that now we have our landmarks placed. From there, we're going to be able to see how everything looks as a whole, and then we can make further adjustments and do the sculpting. I then basically got to sculpting the face itself. So I sculpted in the eye cavity and basically just all the features of the face, like the nose, the eyes, all of these things. I then had to make a lot of refinements to things like the jawline and all of the different areas of the face as well. As you can see, it's a process of basically building up all the different shapes of the face. I had to add the mouth, the chin, and basically in a gradual process. I was just continuing to add more and more features, and as I would rotate around my model, I would spot issues, fix them, make certain forms look better, and yeah. After getting the overall shape for all the features of the face, I would then go in and make more refinements. Like for the mouth, for example, I'd add the corners of the mouth and the cupid's bow shape, and for all the other features of the face as well, I'd start to add more and more details, as now we basically have all the basic forms for the main features of the face in place. So as you can see for the eye here, you want to get it to look like a more realistic cavity. Obviously I added the caruncle for the eye over here in the basically space that the top of the eye and the bottom of the eye meet. And I also added a UV sphere to represent the eyeball itself, which I then placed inside the eye cavity, as you can see. After that, it's just a lot more rotating around your model to look for flaws and basically just trying to refine things, making sure it looks good and all of that. By the way, watching this, you guys may be interested in a more detailed walkthrough that goes more step by step. And that's exactly what I do over on UKOGirls.io. This is a full series of lessons where you'll become amazing at creating high quality Ukiyo inspired models. From sculpting to high quality shader creation and texturing using the layered method, to rigging, I'll go over every step of the process in detail, regardless of your skill level. I'll show you how to make not only this 3D portrait from scratch here, but I'll also show you how to make this rigged character from scratch, including the spicy version of the body. And in addition to all of that, you'll get access to my koi pond and sunflower animation series, which will really further improve your skill in making beautiful Ukiyo inspired models and animations from scratch. There's a few other goodies you'll get upon joining, so make sure to check out all information on UKOGirls.io. After doing these main features of the face, I then like to move on to the ear, and I usually do the ear last because it's just not something that's very interesting to me, and the ear is like probably the least important part of the face, so yeah, we hate ears over here. But yeah, so I make the ear. Basically you make the anti-helix, the helix, the tragus, and all these different parts of the ear that make it up. The ear may seem very complex at first, but after you do it a few times it becomes very repetitive, as with everything else in the body. And not only that, but the ear doesn't really contribute much to the beauty of a character, so you don't need to have like the most amazing ears in the world for your character to look good. What I then did after that was I switched over to the body, and basically I'm just going to make a base mesh for the body. So that means extruding out all of the parts, such as like the arms, the legs, and the chest, and we're going to have to do a lot of refining here to make the hands, the feet, and all that, but you're going to see soon. The skin modifier makes it relatively easy to just like block out different parts of the body, which is why I'm using it here. A lot of people don't use it, but personally I prefer to use it because I'm old style, I guess. People used to use this modifier a lot back in the day, but they don't really use it that much anymore. And I think it's kind of underrated, personally. So yeah, after I'm done with the skin modifier, I then basically go into edit mode and make any adjustments I need, and eventually I start sculpting over the base that we made so that we could actually add all the rest of the forms of the body. As you can see here, you want to make sure that your hands look good and that the proportions are proper so that you don't got any like crazy hands going on. You want to make your hands look neat. So yeah, then I was sculpting the rest of the body, like the breasts and all that good stuff as well, making the arms look better, the whole drill. You're also going to want to make the feet. Now, this can seem really intimidating, but it's actually not that intimidating after you do it a few times. The feet and the toes are just kind of these little fun structures that try and intimidate you, but in reality, all it is just like cutting them off from the foot and then basically rounding them a bit. So yeah, basically just take images of your own foot or use references online, and from there you'll have a good idea of what a foot looks like. I then basically joined the head that we sculpted earlier and this body that we made together, and then I just added more details, like around the clavicle area and there as well, so that we could get everything fused together and looking good. You then want to start the retopology process, which is basically just modeling over the entire body so that we can get it to be, not high poly like the sculpt is. We want it to be nice geometry, low geometry, so that we can then rig it and texture paint it and do all that good stuff. So as you can see here, I usually like to start with the face and the lips in specific, so that, I can basically spiral out from that area and do the rest of the face and the rest of the body. Retopology at first can be a long process, but to make it easier, just make sure, you're referencing images of good topology, and from that it's basically impossible to mess it up if you're making something like a character, because, with all the references that's out there for topology, it's hard to mess up if you follow it well enough. What you see on screen right now is I was basically just making a mouth bag, which is basically the form for the interior of the mouth, so that when we open the mouth in rigging, we can actually see the inside of the mouth. So that's the form that I was making here. Of course, I was also retopologizing the ear, which in my opinion, the ear is like the worst part of the body to retopologize. Like even the fingers and toes are a lot easier than the ear, to be honest. So yeah, that part was a bit annoying. But of course, I also had to do the hands, and the hands, to be honest, are not bad at all. There's a certain shape for the knuckles that I go into on my course, but overall, the hand is something that's pretty predictable, and yeah, like everything else, you get the hang of it with practice. After doing the arm and hand, I then basically continued onwards to do the rest of the chest area and all of that as well. The topology in this area is really not that big of a deal because the deformation in this area is a lot simpler. It's not as important to have good topology as like in the face or the hands or something like that. But yeah, we then want to continue down the leg into the toe area and the foot area, which is a little bit more involved to do, but nothing too crazy because the toes and the foot, ultimately, like especially for the toes, is just kind of like a cylindrical form that you're encapsulating. As you can see, I encapsulated the toes with the geometry here and basically closed it off at the end of the toe. It's not really a big deal how you encapsulate the toes, just kind of get them done is what I'd say, because you really don't need to have it perfect in this area. Even if you're deforming the toes, it's pretty forgiving. The next important step is to UV unwrap the model. So as you can see here, all the checkers are placed pretty decently. Maybe I could have done a better job unwrapping like the breast area, but overall the unwrap is pretty decent. Obviously I made the places like the face higher density because texture painting there requires more definition and resolution. I then basically began making the shader for the face, and I started texture painting the face as well. And you could also see I made the scalp area to be darker, so that it implies that hair is over there basically. So yeah, I then modeled the eyelashes and texture painted in the areas for the eyes as well. Also added some texturing to the eyeball, and from there we start to basically texture all of the main landmarks of the face so that, we start to get something that's a lot less alien looking, I guess you could say. So yeah, I'm using red for things like the lips obviously, and of course the specifics of all this and why it works and like what exactly I'm doing and the whole process I show you on UKOGirls.io, but yeah, this is just my general process for texture painting the face pretty much. You want to make sure you're refining all of the different forms that you texture paint. Like for the lips here, you want to make sure that it's nice and crisp. So yeah, it's basically just a process of layering more and more details and shading to the face, and over time, like it takes time, but eventually you'll end up with a face that looks nice and good. So eventually you're going to want to pick a hairstyle and actually model the hair. The way I do it is by using curves, so that's what I'm doing here. Just basically positioning the hair into place. I picked like a kind of curly hairstyle, so that's what I'm trying to do here. Oh my god, why does this phone have to ruin? But anyways, yeah, so I basically just keep on working on the hair, positioning it more into place, and it takes time, especially if you're doing a more complex hairstyle like the one I'm doing here. It'll take some time, but just make sure you have an idea of what you're trying to make exactly so that you actually know where to place your strands. Otherwise, if you're just kind of shooting in the dark, you won't get something that looks as good. Anyways, you eventually want to make the shader for the hair, and I chose mine to be basically just a blonde color. And from there, after that, you're going to want to start texture painting on it as well, for things like highlights and darkness and all of those good things. I should also mention that I UV unwrapped the hair as well, so that we could actually, texture paint on it. So after that, I began painting, and as you can see here, I basically just added the areas that are like darker and brighter, So that was my approach to basically drawing in the texture paint for the hair. It was important for me to try and make sure that the lines I was drawing kind of went in the same direction that the hair was going, right? So if you look at the hair realistically, you'll see that it has a flow to it. And basically by drawing in these dark areas and these highlights, I'm trying to basically show the viewer, I guess you could say, the person who's looking at this model, what the directional flow of the hair is. After that, it was then time to make all of the clothing accessories. So for example, here I was making the shirt. And doing this is nothing too crazy because we already retopologized the whole body. So, we could literally just like duplicate parts of it and then manipulate what we duplicate around to make parts like the jacket, the shirt, and, all of this stuff. I should also mention that I also made the collar for the shirt and jacket, and to make those types of forms, I basically just extrude out and manipulate the vertices from there. And basically from that, I'm able to make the shape for these things. After finishing most of the upper body and finishing the sleeves and all that, I then decided it was time to work on the skirt. So that's what I'm doing here. As you can see, I decided on a generally green color for the overall outfit, so you might see me here playing around a bit with like different colors because I just wanted to test what would look good exactly. But ultimately, after deciding on the color, I wanted to play around more with the overall shape of the skirt, so that's why I added a loop cut. For the sleeves, I also decided to add this sort of cloth that comes out of the bottom of the sleeve. I just thought it was an accessory that would probably look a bit nice, which is why I added it. As you can see, there's two layers, there's a top and a bottom to this accessory, and basically in order to sell the cloth effect, what I did was sort of oscillate the vertices across the model so that it looked like it had these cylindrical forms that are common in cloth and clothing. So yeah, overall I just continued to work on the clothing, kept on adding more detail like cloth using texture painting and fold and like that type of stuff as well. I also added a bunch of like gold and jewelry and just like bling to kind of make her look a bit better. So yeah. So at this point, most of the clothing is basically done. It's all coming together pretty nicely. And so once I was satisfied with all this, I wanted to move into doing rigging. So thanks to the Rigify add-on, it's actually very, very easy to rig a character because the Rigify add-on is free and it comes with Blender, and basically all you have to do is place your bones and then it'll auto-generate a rig for you. And the only, I guess, more involved thing you have to do is kind of like make sure that all the objects in your model are deforming properly. But that's actually not that big of a headache to do, and it's pretty easy to fix. You might want to use the weight paint mode in order to basically fix any deformation issues with the rigging. So here, for example, on the arm, I had some small things that I wanted to fix, so I was just working on that over there. Also, on the arm in the base mesh for the body, there's usually this thing that happens where when you raise the arms, like the armpits kind of get lifted up, so I was just trying to fix that there, so that when you lift the arm, only the arm lifts up, not the part that's like under the armpit. So yeah, pretty much from there, most of everything is done. You can add some sort of additional sculpting to your model to give it a more realistic look, if that's what you want to do. But yeah, you can then play around with your rig, make sure things deform overall correctly. And then what we want to do is we want to add the circular lighting so that we could have these spheres that we move around, and basically it'll add lighting to our character that we can always adjust. We can make the character darker or we can make the lighting brighter. Everything should be adjustable, so you make circular lighting that's like that. So yeah, I also should say that when we did the hair, you want to make sure that the strands are adjustable in their brightness and darkness, so that if you zoom the camera in or zoom the camera out, you could always basically change it based on the lighting in the scene or whatever looks better in the current shot that you're working on. I also use shape keys to add facial expressions and do all of that sort of stuff. So right here, I was working on the deformation for the mouth, like opening the mouth and closing it, which is a bit more of a pain than, for example, making like an angry expression or something like that where you don't have to move any objects or anything like that. So yeah, I also had to model a tongue, so I just modeled something very, very simple for the tongue, because unless you're making like some crazy tongue animation, I guess you don't really have to have that like detailed of a tongue, just something that gets the job done. So obviously something like this takes a lot of work, especially in this style, trying to balance the 2D look with all this deforming and stuff like that is a very, very difficult feat. So As you can see here, I'm just putting more work into it, trying to get it to look better, and so that it doesn't look like crazy or hideous or anything like that, you know. One thing that's interesting about adding the mouth deformation is that you have to kind of play around with the geometry of the lips as well, so that our texture paint doesn't become completely messed up. As you can see here, I'm kind of like moving around the vertices a bit so that the black line on the top of the bottom of the lips fits into place a bit more. And so yeah, that's pretty much it for this character. At this point, my process kind of went into like a coma period where for a few days I wouldn't look at it, and then I would look at it and make some changes, and then repeating that process, basically just trying to look at it with fresh eyes and spot any mistakes and maybe improve some things as well. So in the end, I was able to make something that looked good. I did rig the hair as well, but I don't think I got it on camera, unfortunately. For the model we make on UKOGirls.io, we do rig the hair though, so definitely do check that out. But yeah, in the end, this was the final result, and I think it looks pretty cool.